Path of Exile 2 is a very complex game, between a myriad of currencies, an intimidating passive skill tree, insane skill customization, and a metric ton of stats and numbers. It's one of the most intimidating game series around when you're a new player. In this video, we're going to break down the absolute basics for newcomers to the series and help you not drown in a sea of systems. And if you're an experienced player, maybe you'll learn a couple of things that you didn't know along the way. Welcome in everybody, Waldosis, the Scarecrow Slasher here, and with the new Path of Exile 2 League coming out this Friday, I thought it was the perfect time to do a new starter guide for all of those who are going to be jumping into the game for the first time with the new Fate of the Vaal League and Last of the Druids expansion. So consider this an everything you need to know to get started type guide for Path of Exile 2, focusing on basic game mechanics that you need to know to get you through the campaign and to endgame. Now, I've been away from making this guide type content for a long while, but recently with a change of life circumstances, it's blown my free time wide open, so I'm looking to start making this type of content again, with Path of Exile 2 being my game of choice. So if you do find this guide helpful, please do comment, subscribe, like, all that jazz, because it will really help get me back into the algorithm after being away from doing this type of content for such a long while. Also, if you do like Path of Exile 2 content, I will be running it weekly over on my Twitch channel, along with horror games and TTRPGs, so do make sure to follow there as well, if you are interested in checking out that type of content. So let's start with the very first decision that you'll need to make upon loading the game up: your choice of league. Leagues in Path of Exile are essentially huge patches that come with a vast amount of content that are handled completely separate from the standard game. The league runs for a limited time, only around 3 to 4 months, and focuses on a single main mechanic as a new core feature. For example, in the new Fate of the Vaal League, the focus is on the Vaal Temple, whereas previous leagues included things like monster hunting or abyss rifts. When the league finishes, it becomes archived and your character gets moved to the standard league, which is available all the time. And that essentially contains all of your historic characters. The core game loop of Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 that keeps people playing is this loop of creating new characters for each league to challenge the new content every 3 to 4 months. Now, depending on the mechanic that was added in as part of that league, it may also get moved over to the standard league when the league concludes. However, this isn't always the case, and mechanics don't always translate over in exactly the same way. For example, the Abyss mechanic, which saw rifts opening up in every zone around the world and monsters swarming in, is going to be removed at the end of the current league, but will be added into the standard league as a specific endgame map only mechanic. If you're ever in doubt as to what to play, always select the currently running league, as that will be where the vast majority of the players of the game will currently be. Now, when starting a new league or standard run, there's also 2 additional options: hardcore mode and solo self-found. If you don't select either of these, you'll get the standard Path of Exile experience, complete with all the MMO aspects, trading and more. However, these 2 options offer new ways to challenge a league and your skills as a player. Solo self-found forces you to only use items that you yourself have found. No trading for those powerful items that you need for your build. Whereas hardcore mode gives you a single life to make it through the game, with the character reverting to the standard league if they die. If you want the biggest challenge, enable both of these for hardcore solo self-found. This is also known as HCSSF, but if you're watching this video, you're probably not ready for that quite yet. Now, if you're looking at guides for the characters that you're running, you've probably come across the term League Start. This refers to the first character at the start of a league, and is probably the hardest point of any league, as it means you have absolutely no resources in your stash from other characters, as loot is shared between characters in the same league and moved to the standard league when the league closes. But as you don't have access to your standard stash in a new league, the first character that you run is generally on more of a budget in terms of the build that you could work towards. Generally, when you're looking at build guides for different classes, you'll see multiple variations of the build, for leveling, league start, and then endgame, and this is generally the progression that you'll follow as you gain more levels and more currency. Path of Exile 2 has 7 core classes, 8 with the introduction of the Druid in patch 0.4, and each of these classes is designed around 3 core attributes. 5 of these classes are built around single core stats, making them a good starting point for new players. For dexterity, you have the bow-wielding ranger and the spear-wielding huntress. For strength, you have the tough and tanky warrior, and for intelligence, you have the spell-weaving sorceress and the minion-summoning witch. You then have 3 double-stat classes. For dexterity and strength, you have the fast and furious melee warrior monks and the crossbow-wielding mercenaries. Whereas for intelligence and strength, you have the druid, swapping between spells and powerful animal forms. Each of these classes can be enhanced into what's known as an ascendancy, which essentially is an advanced class that comes with its own skill tree. These generally have their same core mechanics as the base class, but introduce new elements. For example, the Infernalist ascendancy for the Witch allows the Witch to transform into a demon form, which causes them to take damage over time in return for a boost to their spell power. I'll be doing a video on ascendancies soon, so keep an eye out for it, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Once you've selected your league and chosen your character, it's time to jump into the world of Rayclast, where you'll be dumped on a beach unarmed and ready to take on the world. And the start of the game is very straightforward. Talk to the survivor, equip your weapon, and then follow the game as it guides you to Clearfell. You'll get a core skill gem as you go through this section, and the game will teach you how to equip it and the basics of using flasks. When you beat the Miller and get into Clearfell itself, you'll get your first uncut skill gem, and you'll have your first few passive points. So let's talk a little bit about the incredibly intimidating skill tree and skill gem system. Let's start with the simpler, but much flashier skill gem system. Skill gems come in three varieties. Skill gems themselves are specific levels which allow you to engrave skills that can be used by your character. A good example of this is Lightning Spear. This is a skill gem that can be used to throw a spear of lightning as long as you have a spear equipped. It's worth noting the skills aren't dependent on your class, they're dependent on the weapon that you have equipped. However, as you progress, you'll find yourself unable to equip weapons that aren't suitable for your class due to them having stat requirements. For example, a low-level warrior could use a bow when starting out and take all the bow skills, but will quickly find themselves unable to meet the dexterity requirements for more high-powered bows and higher levels of the skill. Now you can use your passive tree to add other stats in, but generally you want to favour the weapons that are focused around your class, or the weapons that are based around the other classes that use the same core stat. For example, a bow, because it is focused around dexterity, could be used by a ranger, huntress, mercenary, or monk, as they are all dexterity-based classes. Once you have engraved the skill gem, press G to open the skill screen and drag it onto your skill list. This will then allow you to assign it to the hotbar as an ability that you can use. But in Path of Exile, that is just the start of creating your skill set. Each individual skill gem, when socketed, will have a number of slots for a second type of gem, support gems. Support gems allow you to modify how a skill gem works. For example, if we look at the skill Stormlance, whenever this skill is used, it throws out a single spear. However, we could use the multi-shot support gem to make it throw 3 at once. To know whether a support gem works with a specific skill, take a look at this section at the top of the skill. This has a list of all the keywords that will be represented in the support gems. When you go to carve a support gem, it will also show you a list of recommended supports to carve for each skill that you have equipped. However, you can click the All button at the bottom of this list to see all of the gems, because there'll often be many that you can use that aren't shown in this screen, that can create some really interesting combos. Using Stormlance as the example again, multi-shot isn't actually one of the standard gems that you can equip from the recommended screen, and you need to get it from the all gem screen. But you could build an entire build around multi-shotting with Stormlance, making the system really flexible. This is one of the core attractions of Path of Exile 2, creating interesting builds that you can use for each individual league, with each league generally bringing in new skill and support gems to create even more wild combos. There's also a final type of skill gem known as Spirit Gems. You get your first one of these around halfway through Act 1 after defeating the King in the Mists. Spirit Gems allow you to add skills to your build that generally don't have an active component, such as Herald of Thunder, which causes enemies to explode with lightning bolts when they die. This is active all the time, however it requires you to reserve a set amount of spirit. You start the game with 30 spirit, and as you progress through the campaign, eventually you'll unlock the ability to use up to 100 spirit. Once socketed, you can then customize the spirit gems using support gems like you can with skills, adding yet another layer of customization. The combination of spirit, skill and support gems creates your core build. And most builds revolve around empowering one skill gem much further than the others as the core ability of a build, and generally that's the name that you'll see attached to the build in build guides, for example Flicker Strike Monk or Contagion Witch. Once you have chosen how you want to start progressing your build, you then need to start looking at the passive tree, which is a whole beast of its own, so let's take a look at that now. The passive tree allows you to build your character towards certain statistics or specializations by selecting nodes to empower everything from critical hits and specific damage types to core stat increases and powerful buffs. Some of these allow you to select multiple options, meaning it's extremely powerful when you create your build, but it's also very easy to accidentally select the wrong things and become very underpowered. Passive tree planning is a whole thing of its own, and there's loads of guides and tools out there about how to level your tree for specific builds. We won't get into that here because every character is different based on the skills that you've selected and gems that you've socketed. However, I will be creating loads of build guides as the league progresses, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell if you want to check out some of my builds as they become available. In It is important to note, however, that you will unlock an NPC called the Hooded One around halfway through Act 1, who will allow you to refund your passives for a certain amount of gold if you've made mistakes, so you aren't locked into your choices forever. Occasionally in this tree you'll also come across gem sockets that can be used for another type of gem known as jewels, and unique gems can also add incredibly powerful new mechanics, such as allowing you to use skills from a specific weapon without that weapon equipped. And as you can see, between skill gems, support gems, spirit gems, passive nodes and jewels, character customization is incredibly detailed, and a large amount of your time with the game will be working out builds and experimenting to make cool things happen. For example, I spent ages working on a build that made every enemy I killed with a fireball explode and trigger more fireballs. It actually got to the point where I would fill my screen with so much fire that the game would crash, so you can do some pretty wild stuff, especially when using more interesting support gems. So, you've made it to Clearfell, what's next? Well, now you're into the game, start working on your build and follow the story. This will take you through the acts, and as your character gets more powerful and goes towards the end game, you're going to earn a ton of different weird currencies that probably don't mean anything to you at this point, and you'll think that they're throwaway items, but they aren't. Orbs, shards, feathers, prisms, keys, baubles, omens, essences, emotions, whetstones, scrolls, artifacts. There are so many currencies your head's going to spin, but they're all useful for different purposes. Most of them don't become important until the endgame, so it's worth just stockpiling them in your stash as you earn them. However, there's a couple of them that are quite important, the first of which being the Scroll of Wisdom. Scrolls of Wisdom allow you to identify the items that you find while going through the campaign, meaning you pretty much always need a stockpile of them, so make sure to save them when you can. Orbs are also very important as they allow you to add or reroll stats on items or increase their rarity, with Exalted Orbs being particularly powerful to get a piece of gear upgraded. However, in 90% of cases, it's worth just stockpiling these until endgame unless you happen across a super powerful item that is perfect for your build, in which case it can sometimes be worth investing early to help you clear faster and get more loot. Now, as you progress through the campaign, there's going to be a couple of key pit stops that you'll make along the way. The first of these happens in Act 2, around the level 20 mark. You'll come across a side quest to take the Trial of Sekhmet. You can do this right after you find a Jinn buyer coin in the Traitor's Pass of Act 2. Don't worry if that means nothing to you, because the game will heavily imply that you should be going there. Here you'll have to complete a trial which comes with a few new mechanics, and upon completing it, you'll be able to choose your ascendancy, or subclass. The first of the new mechanics that you'll come across in the trial is the Honour system. Honour acts a little bit like health, getting depleted when you get hit, however this isn't restored by healing. If you run out of honour during the course of the trial, then the trial is failed, at which point you need to go and get a new coin and try again, although your coin is reusable on your first visit. As you progress into the temple, you'll hit a few different challenge types such as gauntlets, traps, waves of enemies, followed by a large boss, after which you'll enter a chamber where you can choose your ascendancy. If you ever want to change your ascendancy, you'll need to find another coin and repeat the ascendancy trial. As you progress, you'll also need to return to the ascendancy trial to unlock more skill points for your ascendancy passive tree. Each return requires a coin of a higher level to enter the temple and only allows one attempt per coin, so spend them wisely. You'll also need to complete another trial in Act 3 to unlock more ascendancy points called the Trial of Chaos. This can be found off the Chimeral Wastelands and you'll be directed there once you beat the preceding boss. This doesn't require a coin, but instead requires a Chimeral inscribed ultimatum. However, the format of completing trials without running out of honour is the same as the Sekhmet trial. Once you have your 4 ascendancy points from the Trial of Sekhmet and Trial of Chaos, you're well on your way to becoming an in-game powerhouse. Keep on following the story until eventually you complete the campaign and unlock the map machine. It is worthwhile noting, however, that you will be coming back to the Trial of Chaos and Trial of Sekhmet to unlock further ascendancy points at higher level, the first time of which will be when you have a level 60 Jinbaya coin or level 65 ultimatum. You can also get a further 2 passive points in an endgame version where you'll have to fight a pinnacle boss, but we'll talk about that in the endgame video. When you unlock the map machine is where the game truly opens up, but that's something that we'll be covering in an upcoming video after the new league launches, so we can include all the new changes to the mapping system and the new Vaal temple feature. However, to give a very brief overview, the map engine gives you access to the Atlas map that has nodes that must be activated with waystones. Each waystone you find comes with different modifiers and different tiers. Higher tiers of waystone will result in stronger and more plentiful monsters on the map and also better loot. You'll often hear these tiers being referred to as T1 to T15. As you explore the Atlas map, you'll find different nodes that have different sub-objectives, such as Breach, Delirium, Expedition or Ritual, with Abyss being added in the Fate of the Vaal League. As you progress through these different sub-objectives, the monsters have a chance of dropping splinters of the relevant type. These can be placed in the realm gate on the main map screen to enter a specific domain where you can challenge what are known as pinnacle bosses. Pinnacle bosses are the true endgame challenge of Path of Exile, and they're really cool, so I don't want to spoil them here, as they're all really interesting fights and you'll want to experience them properly for your first time. However, I will be doing specific videos on each pinnacle boss in the future. As you do content in the Atlas, you'll open up even more passive skill trees, which can be progressed by completing the relevant types of Atlas content and will improve your ability to run that specific type of content more efficiently. And that's it for a very basic introduction to Path of Exile 2. As you can tell, even at a basic level, the game is very complex, but hopefully this has demystified some of the basics. If you enjoyed this video, please do make sure to like, subscribe and add a comment, as I've only just returned to doing guide content and I need all the algorithm help that I can get to push this back out into the world. Also, make sure to come over and check my Twitch channel where I stream Path of Exile and TTRPGs once a week and horror games a couple of times a week. And with that, good luck in Right Class, and I'll catch you in the next video.